info from the depths of
ELO Hell.
Hello everyone, welcome. My name's Jamie the LoLSquire here with a little more insight into the meta from the depths of ELO Hell. Today we're going to follow up on the previous video and give some examples of what we talked about, the metagame. We established yesterday roughly what the metagame is. Now it's time to give some examples to flesh out the information on the topic and how to use the metagame to your advantage. First, we need to talk about what makes a pick meta. We know typically each team consists of a top, jungler, mid lane, ADC, and support, but what we didn't discuss is why certain champions are chosen to fulfill those roles and why some work better than others. So let's dive into the raging river of meta picks. Certainly with a game that changes so frequently, and one with so many options as to who to play, it's to be expected that champions who inhabit certain lanes are bound to change more often than not. But there is a formulaic approach to when and why champions succeed so well at some times, and seem to flounder in other circumstances. To best explain this, I did a little bit of reading on Reddit, which is a great tool to figure out what people are talking about in the current metagame. The meta can evolve based around a few different factors: champion changes, item changes, and map changes. A big example of this was the advent of Cinderhulk and the champions that accompanied it. For example, Gragas, Volibear, Sejuani, Zac, and Sion, among others. There are many more champions that did synergize well with Cinderhulk upon the release of the highly overtuned item, but these ones stick out for me. This shifted the way the jungle was being played to that of a very tanky meta, and it also gave the opportunity to jungle to a number of champions who otherwise would have been crippled by their clears when coupled with extra sustain gained through Ranger's Trailblazer, better known as the now removed Purple Smite. The sustain in the newly unforgiving jungle at the start of Season 5 was much preferred over the typical kill the jungle and don't take damage style that was prevalent before, with warrior jungles such as Lee Sin and Jarvan 4 among others. The sheer amount of damage that these junglers would put out in the beginning gave them a big advantage when it came to affecting lanes and exerting presence on the map. And don't get me wrong, there's still great picks in today's metagame. So why were champions who used Cinderhulk preferred over other styles that were already dominating the meta? Well, what Cinderhulk did was give champions in the jungle the ability to both sustain their resource levels as well as providing them an extra clearing tool with the Immolate passive. That's the same one that's on Sunfire Cape. And Cinderhulk also gave a large HP boon to those tanky junglers that wanted to be tanky without sacrificing much clear speed. We started seeing Cinderhulk outside the jungle simply because it was so strong. The amount of HP that it gave boded very well for top lane melee champions who had to get up close and personal. We started seeing these champions like Sion and Shen take Cinderhulk because of their natural synergy with HP, turning them into seemingly unstoppable forces. Now that I've given you an example of how item changes shift the meta, what about champion changes? Champion changes are in a way a double-edged sword because of how dynamic the interaction is between other champions. When the Juggernaut patch was released, we could talk about the most recent Marksman patch of Season 6, but in my eyes, the Juggernaut patch had a much bigger impact on champion selection and the way the game was being played at the time. So, when the Juggernaut patch including Garen and Darius, Skarner and Mordekaiser was released, you could hardly go a game without either banning all 4 picks or praying to the ELO gods that your enemy was somehow blissfully ignorant as to how powerful these champions really were. I, for one, picked up Skarner the day that the patch was released, and let me tell you, he was completely absurd for about 2 or 3 days. Up until Riot sort of said, what have we unleashed, and released a hotfix patch to actually make him defeatable. Granted, Skarner has always been filed under the sort of hard-to-balance category from what others, including Riot themselves, have said about his initial release. These champions were a mainstay until the next cycle of patches came out and they were tuned down. They since have been toned down a little more, whilst other champion strengths have been buffed up, but they continue to make an appearance on the champion select screen, especially Darius, who in my eyes was always a good pick at lower elos. The opposite side of a champion being buffed or nerfed is that it creates windows for other champions who may have not been touched in the patch to shine. Each of the champions I listed, while they had their day in the sun, also have counterparts who fare well against them. Darius, for example, needs to get in close to be in any way effective, so a champion who can keep their distance and damage him enough to even the odds fared well. For example, a marksman or a high mobility champion would ideally fare well against said champs because they simply can't get in close enough to be completely effective. I want to talk about Quinn into Darius really quickly, who I can't speak much of because I haven't really played her in the past, but Quinn's high mobility and skills that create space were very much needed to stave off what Darius was best at. Another example of this could be Vayne. Her true damage and knockback would create the space necessary to keep Darius at bay. To me, Kayle into Garen is another great pick because of her heal move speed steroid on her W, coupled with the slow on her Q, the range steroid on her E, and her ability to completely deny his ult with her own ult. It provides her a great set of tools to keep Garen down. We're likely to see a resurgence of Quinn players, mostly in the top lane due to her current kit update. She's still very much placed at the same strengths as she did before, only now they're much more focused on her doing what she does best, creating space and utilizing her high mobility. This is proving to turn her into a very decent split pusher who can escape an ambush or join a team fight very quickly. Also, with the buffs to Jinchu's Rage Blade, I've seen some very good Kayle games lately. One of my favorite Kayle builds is still the full crit chance attack speed with a high cooldown reduction to make her into a high damage kiting champion who has the ability to deny executions with her ultimate. Sometimes it's neither of these things that dictate what's going to be in the meta or not. When we first saw Fnatic's Yellow Star playing Nautilus support, a few people started trying it in lower elo, and now it's considered a very viable pick, simply because they saw a pro player doing it. Yellow Star probably got the idea from someone else too, and this just speaks to the trickle-down word-of-mouth effect that the community has developed over the years of playing League of Legends and it evolving. PBE players are also constantly trying new things, as they feel they can do so without any real repercussions to their elo, plus they have a leg up on the rest of the community due to the fact that they're accessing patches earlier than most. This doesn't mean you can't try new things on the live server, I just advise against going AD Soraka for the first time in the mid lane during someone's ranked promos. That's a one-way ticket to having a bad game, and you're not going to make any friends in the process. The final point I want to hit in regards to what makes something meta are map changes. I mentioned before that at the beginning of Season 5, the jungle became much more unforgiving. The addition of a leashing mechanic to camps made it tougher for marksmen to survive in the jungle with a reasonable clear. This eliminated some of the niche picks such as Twisted Fate, as well as one of my favorite picks, the Teemo jungle. Once again, we'll talk about off-meta picks some other time. This also created problems for squishier champions to have much success in the jungle, meaning that the meta had shifted once again to the high-sustained, slow and steady jungle we already talked about. Now in the age of Season 6, the jungle's been toned down a little bit, so it wouldn't surprise me if we see a resurgence of some of the old niche picks coming back to the jungle as more meta-worthy picks because of changes to items, champions, and the map itself, but only time will tell. And that just about covers it for today. If you find something you disagree with, or have something you want to add to the discussion, or simply want to tell me that I'm uglier than Dr. Mundo, leave a comment. Like and subscribe to keep up to date with the videos I'll be releasing, and next time, as promised, we'll be talking about off-meta and how and why it works. Now go get on the rift. LoLSquire. Bringing you info from the depths of
ELO Hell.